when we were talking to pollsters before the election, and actually even after the midterms, they would sort of say, yes, if you ask people whether they want Biden to run, they'll say no. Mm-hmm. But then when you sort of to break it down, there is really no. I think the problem with the Democratic Party is they have a bit of a bench problem, right, particularly at the moment.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by White House reporter Naomi Lim. Naomi, we finally got our big announcement from President Biden. What's happening?
I know. We only have like 18 months to go before the next election, but things actually got real this week. We saw the president roll out his much awaited, highly anticipated re-election announcement video. Mm-hmm. It was actually rather long, like 3 minutes, which I thought was interesting. They obviously have a lot to say. Mm-hmm. And that message seemed to be very similar to the one that he ran on in 2020. Back then, he sort of said, this is a battle for the soul of the nation when he was against former President Donald Trump. And this time we sort of saw a video titled Freedom, and the opening images were from January 6 about the abortion protests outside the Supreme Court, as well as what they say is a Republican crackdown on voting rights. And so I think that we're going to see similar themes play out. I guess the question is whether voters are still perceptible to that argument. They would say that they had success with it within the midterms, the right. 2022 midterms. So why change something that's broken? And I guess what's going to be interesting now is how Biden campaigns, talking to people involved with the campaign, as well as sort of surrogates, supporters of the president. They say that he's going to adopt sort of this rose garden strategy where, he will do events, but I mean, he's not going to big public events is not his, he's not that
forte.
Exactly. He's better in more intimate environments, that retail politicking that we've.
He's a backslapper.
Exactly, and a hand gladder. Is that
right.
Is that the right way to say it?
Yes. Yeah, some people have said that about him, yes. But the more polite one is he's a glad handler.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. And that is something that we expect to see, and that means that he can also sort of tout what he says his accomplishments, whether it be like the Democrats' only Inflation Reduction Act or bipartisan consensus that he's made with the infrastructure package, for example. And so that's what we're going to see. Another thing is that they're going to have to start raising money. There are estimates that this general election season will cost maybe up to $1 billion, and so that's something that we'll watch before the June deadline for disclosing what he's raised.
So you mentioned the midterm elections. There have been a lot of concerns when you just look at Biden's poll numbers. The lack of enthusiasm among Democratic voters, particularly younger Democratic voters, seem to want an alternative, don't have really much of an alternative. Fair to middling to sometimes poor job approval ratings, particularly when you break it down by issue. But he's in his 80s, oldest president ever to serve. But when you look at sometimes when they've been able to frame this as more of a binary choice rather than a referendum, 2020 in the midterms, it worked, and those poll numbers didn't really matter.
Yeah, I mean, when we were talking to pollsters before the election, and actually even after the midterms, they would sort of say, yes, if you ask people whether they want Biden to run, they'll say no. Mm-hmm. But then when you sort of to break it down, there is really no. I think the problem with the Democratic Party is they have a bit of a bench problem, right, particularly at the moment. I mean, that might change in 2028. Mm-hmm. Did I get that number right? Yes.
You did. Very good.
It's a long time from now, but they have to sort of see how they go. I mean, he promised that he would be a bridge. I was at the rally where he promised that he would be a bridge to the future, mm-hmm, in terms of whether that be sort of Michigan Governor Whitner or Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, mm-hmm, and maybe that bridge is
who's
like
in charge of building bridges.
Exactly,
right.
But maybe that bridge is a bit longer than we originally anticipated, and so we'll sort of see how those poll numbers affect going forward, and maybe they might even come down a bit more as we sort of face this sort of immigration crisis that we're seeing at the southern border, and how that exacerbates with the lifting of Title 42, as well as things like the debt ceiling, and how this game of chicken that both the White House and House Republicans in Congress are playing plays out.
Right, and that is really the big fight that the president is involved in right now, and he's saying, this isn't really a fight, I'm not going to negotiate. But House Republicans have actually passed, however narrowly, their plan through their chamber. Does that put the ball a little bit back in Biden's court?
I mean, the White House would say no. They've already released a statement saying that there's no way that this will become law.
Sure.
And essentially, I mean, they're right, because one, he will veto it, and also that the bill that the House Republicans pass will not get the votes that it needs in the Senate. I guess the issue that they're playing now is that they're talking at cross purposes. The House Republicans want a debt ceiling discussion that's tied with spending cuts, and the White House is very adamant that it should be separate,
right.
or that the debt ceiling be raised first, and then they have the discussions. So I think somebody is going to have to blink, whether it be they get together into a room and discuss, fiscal policy in a way that makes sense to both parties. Because I mean, half of the stuff that the House Republicans included their bills are things that are very important to Biden, particularly going into the re-election. I mean, you mentioned younger voters before, and what they're proposing is blocking any kind of or further student debt relief, and so that's something that is going to be a no-go when it comes to the White House. And so I think that less time than before that will tell. I think that the problem is that we're seeing there are estimates that tax collections will be lower than anticipated, and so maybe this X date, or when extraordinary measures with the debt ceiling actually get exhausted, will be earlier rather than later, or sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm. So Biden is going to hope that all these voters don't compare him to the Almighty, they compare him to Donald Trump.
Exactly.
Thank you, Naomi. You can read Naomi and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.